I'm glad you're all here. You're all very welcome. And actually, I was worried that we would have a very poor turnout. I figured everybody went out and celebrated the holiday and thought they were too tired to come tonight. So I'm pleased to see this number. We have had a few more. I hope that everyone is here because they saw what a wonderful program we're probably going to have tonight. I want to welcome a special guest here who found us through our social media presence. We've been talking about that. Well, we have someone visiting with us who found us that way. Her name is Robin Thaxton, but she doesn't spell it like our Polk County Thaxton. She spells it with a CK rather than an X. But we're glad you're here, Robin. We're glad you found us. She's come to visit with us from Hiram. So, and she came because of our topic for the night. So, David, you've already done us a favor. We'll begin with the minutes. We'll call on Sheila Wade, our secretary.
Well, you know I can't read, and now I have this terrible cough, so if I start coughing, y'all just pretend that the minutes are correct and just approve them as read. Minutes from the April 26th meeting of the Polk County Historical Society. The meeting was called to order by President Ellen Hester at 7 p.m. All members and our numerous visitors were made welcome. The minutes were read and approved. Emily Shaw reported that we have $6,293.50 in our operating account, and in the reserve memorial account, we have $4,305. The treasurer's report was approved as read. Carol Casey reported that the programs for the remainder of the year were going to be very informative and entertaining. Ms. Hester thanked Carol and Joanne Starnes for chairing the program committee. Our programs have been outstanding. Angela Bentley reported that our members have volunteered to serve refreshments for the next few months. Greg Gray reported that Mrs. Edna Bowen has donated a display case. Dick Parker donated 2 books, What Do You Have? A History of the Varsity and Memories from Marshes of Glen. Mr. Gray stated that the historic Van Wert Church in Rockmart has structural damage and that donations were needed to make the repairs. Dick Parker, publisher, author, and collaborator. That's the word. Of 25 books, presented a most informative and entertaining discussion entitled The Priceless Gift to Your Family, The Importance of Preserving Your History. Millard Greer announced that volunteer Jimmy Thompson was working on putting our programs on YouTube. 4 programs are already available. Jacob Thompson is working with Mr. Greer in taping our monthly programs. Our next meeting will be May 31st with attorney Davis Archer presenting the program. Lovely refreshments were served by Kathy Kitchens and Ken Bedford. Glenn Frazier adjourned the meeting with prayer. Respectfully respectfully submitted, Sheila Wade.
That's the best news I ever heard.
I know. I'm glad I could make y'all laugh.
Are there any additions or corrections to our minutes?
Move it.
Do I hear a second? I don't think we need a second, actually. Any?
We have another first-timer. Linda, tell me your last name. Linderman. Linderman. And she has recently moved to Cedartown, so we're proud of her.
Oh, well, I'm glad you called that to my attention. You're very welcome. And we'll catch up after the meeting, okay? Are there any, if there are no corrections, then the minutes will be approved as read. And before I move to the treasurer's report, and I'm going to have to fess up that I broke the surge protector upstairs, and I tried to purchase one today, and it doesn't exactly work with the way our wiring is set up there, but the way those plugs are in the floor. So I couldn't do an agenda, and I've just had to jot down a few notes as I went along. But I meant to begin our meeting by making sure that everyone knows, and I'm sure you do, that we lost one of our true stalwarts over the last month. Ann White will be so missed by this organization. When I first started coming here on a regular basis, I could just depend on Ann to know about acquisitions, to know what was going on, to be the one here with the door unlocked on Wednesday afternoon. And Ann was just such an asset to us, and she will be very much missed. We'll have our treasurer's report by Emily Shaw, our treasurer.
Okay, our regular account balance is $6,148.85. We have 3 new members this month. Of course, the revenue coming in right now is really slow, but we're not spending a lot unless we have to buy surge protectors. In the memorial fund, we have $4,305, and we have already got contributions in memory of Ann White tonight, so if anybody has anything, I'll be glad to accept them. If anybody didn't know how we do this, if somebody gives to the memorial fund, I notify Charlotte Greer, and she sends a card to the family letting them know that who gave a contribution for the memorial fund. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Emily. Are there any additions or corrections to the treasurer's report? If not, they'll stand approved as read, and as usual, there'll be a copy of the treasurer's report attached to the minutes. So if in future you want to look at it, you're welcome to. It should be on file upstairs. Do we have any old business? Of course, we have that big old business hanging over our head of how do we manage to get an elevator, but that's just rocking along. And there'll be more discussion on that later. I do have a meeting, and our Vice President, Larry Bentley, is going with me to meet with the city manager and some people from the city on Thursday. So we are making progress. It's slow, but we're making some progress. Is there any new business? Hearing none, we'll move on. Jacob, I'm glad you're here again tonight and didn't decide you just didn't want to fool with us old fuddy-duddies. I think Jacob's a young man who doesn't mind history too much. We are so glad to have David Archer with us tonight. He is an attorney from Cartersville, and I understand he is just an avid historian. He's kind of like some of the rest of us. We like it. We like to get into it and research it and see what we can find. And he's going to come and talk with us tonight on as my grandparents would have said, the war in Polk County, and some things that happened to go along with that. David, would you come forward?
You know, hopefully it's been long enough since the Civil War ended that my topic is not going to hit any strong objections or nerves, but I hate to tell y'all this, but in Polk County during the Civil War, y'all had some Yankee sympathizers. You did, and I'm going to name names. You know, some time ago, I do this around a little bit, mostly in Bartow County, but I was asked to do a program for the Edward Valley Historical Society last year, 2 years ago, I don't remember. And in preparation for that, I started looking for some source material. I like to research and find source material, not even read books about people that wrote about what happened in the Civil War 150 years later, but find source material, things that were written by the people who actually lived through it. And I stumbled across something, actually almost by accident, something called the Southern Claims Commission. Has anybody ever heard of that? The Southern Claims Commission was created in 1871 under the administration of that Yankee General Grant, who also became president. Now, the idea of the Southern Claims Commission was to create an entity and appoint some commissioners who would consider petitions made limited to those states that were a part of the Confederacy, plus West Virginia. I don't know why they included West Virginia, because they kind of opted out of the Confederacy and joined the Union. But if there were sympathizers who could prove that they were loyal to the Union, to the United States, and to its Constitution, all throughout the Civil War, even though they lived in the Confederate States, and if they could prove that, and if they could prove that Union troops confiscated, stole, took property that belonged to them, and they could establish what property it was and the value of it, then there was a process created that they could file these petitions. Now, all over the southern states, there were 22,000 some odd petitions filed. 32% of them were approved. Some 7,000 were approved. The majority of them were rejected because the people couldn't prove the standards that were set to prove loyalty. There was a set of questions. Let's see, they had 51 questions that you had to file a written response if you were the claimant. And then they had another bunch of questions if it was a witness that was testifying on the claimant's behalf. They had another set of questions if you were a female filing a claim. And they had another set of questions if you were a former slave filing a claim. And some of these questions, let me just read a few of them, and then I'm going to talk about the individual petitions that were made by Polk County citizens that I found. Any of you on Ancestry.com? Type in Southern Claims Commission, and you can do the same thing I've done. And you can read, it's real hard to read this stuff, but you can read what these people wrote about their experiences during the Civil War. Not what somebody wrote about, what they felt, but what they wrote. Here's some of the questions. Did you ever do anything or say anything against the Union cause? And if so, what did you say and why? Were you at all times during the war willing and ready to do whatever you could to aid of the Union cause? Did you ever do anything for the Union cause or its advocates or defenders? If so, state what you did, giving times, places, and names of persons aided and particulars where the persons aided your relations. Now you understand, this is in 1871. From 1871 to 1873 is when this commission was active. And these people are supposed to go back and give dates and times and specifics, but that's the requirement. I like this one. Which side did you take while the insurgent states were succeeding from the Union in 1860 and 1861? What did you do to show on which side you stood? Did you adhere to the Union cause after the states had passed into rebellion, or did you go with your state? This is a good one. What were your feelings concerning the Battle of Bull Run or Manassas, the capture of New Orleans, the fall of Vicksburg, and the final surrender of the Confederate forces? Now, it goes on, and I'm not going to read all of them. That gives you a few samples. Now, as I said, I'm going to give names. And what I'd like to do is have this kind of interactive. If I call a name that you're familiar with, or maybe even related to, just raise your hand and let's talk about that person. Tell me, let's talk about it. Now, in Polk County, there were 29 petitions that were denied for various reasons, and we're going to talk about some of those reasons. There were 6 applications that were approved. And I'm going to talk about those that were approved first. Now, you understand, you had to swear an oath to file this petition under penalty of perjury that you were a Union loyalist and sympathizers living in the southern states, and give specific examples of what you did to demonstrate that. And if you got over that hump, then you had to give a narrative description of what it was the Yankees took. How many cows, how many horses, and some of these narratives are absolutely astounding. And I won't have time tonight to read specific things. I will a few that are a little bit interesting to me. All of them are interesting, but all right, the first one. Well, I'm going to read the names because I'm not going to talk about each one of these people, but I want to read the names of the people who filed petitions that were denied. W.C. or Wiley Crawford Barber. Surely y'all know who that is. Had a big old house south of Rockmart. I found a picture of it online. Bob Camp, Henry Drummond, Sarah Drummond, John P. Greenwood.
Oh, don't go so fast.
I'm sorry, what? Uh-oh. Do we have a relative of a Union sympathizer? All right, John P. Greenwood, David N. Hampton, James R. Harbin, William A. Harris, Thomas Haynes, John R. Heaton, William Hickman, Annie Hildebrand, J.C. Hitchcock, Milton J. Isbell, Pendleton Isbell, William Jenkins Estate, Martha Judkins, widow of Robertson Judkins, Jane A. King, Charles G. Knight, Jonathan Long, Pittman Lumpkin, Mahalia Thomas, James A. Thompson Estate, Thomas J. Thompson, William Wheeler, Green M. Horton, is spelled W-H-O-R-T-O-N, Macaja Wilson, Hattie Wynn, and Robert C. Wynn.
How do they spell win?
W-Y-N-N. All right, here are the ones that were approved. Now, surely y'all got to know this first one. Elias A. Camp. He was a preacher at Van Wert. Stephen King. Not the one that writes the horror stories. James D. Thompson, Reuben Davis, Susan Davis, and Benjamin Guyton, and those last three were former slaves. Those 6 were approved out of, 35 that were filed, and that's about the way it was running, a little bit less than nationwide. Let's talk about some of these. Let's start out with Stephen King. He filed a claim for $960. It was approved for $295.50 that was allowed. He was able to prove that he was arrested by Confederate scouts. He had to walk 70 miles to Talladega, Alabama. He was held in jail for disloyalty to the Confederate government. The property taken was by Sherman's army in October, November of 1864. It included horses, mules, hogs, fodder, sorghum syrup. At the end of the findings, they said we found him loyal. Elias A. Camp. Now, Elias Camp filed a claim for $383. It was approved for $233. And I'm going to read verbatim the commission's finding on this one. He was a minister and farmer. He was threatened and molested. Rebel scouts turned him out of the pulpit and threatened to burn his church. He was an active member of a secret Union society called Golden Eagle and initiated the 2 witnesses that testified into the organization. we find him loyal. The Union Army was encamped on the road between his house and Van Wert, and some soldiers with officers came to his house and took the property named in the amount. Now, the two witnesses who he had initiated into the Golden Eagle organization was Richard A. Camp, which was his son, and a man called William Long. There's a lengthy obituary. He died in April 18, 1901, and the obituary talks about his long service as a minister and a farmer, and just a damn good person. And they talked at length about that. The next one is a former slave, Benjamin Guyton. Uh-oh. Let me find Benjamin Guyton. Where is he? All right, Benjamin Guyton was allowed $100. His witness, a man named, first name I can't read, Sanders, wrote this to his petition and witnessed. We were fellow servants in the same field of Mr. Tom, and it's real hard to read, I think it's Quarles. Did y'all have some Quarles over here? I know they did in Bartow County and Floyd County. I think it says Tom Quarles. Obeying him the best we could, hoping the day would soon come when we would be made free, and thanks God it did come, and thank him still. That's what the former slave wrote. Reuben Davis, a former slave, he was approved. He had one horse and some tobacco taken. He was approved in the amount of $175. And he wrote in part, I bought the horse before freed and was cried out. I'm thinking that means it was sold at an auction. That's what it says. And paid $100 cash and paid blank since freedom. I can't read the amount. And I owe some on the horse yet. I bought the horse from blank, I can't read the first name, Philpott. And I know y'all know the name Philpott, particularly in Rockmart. You got a Philpott Street. Y'all don't have one over here, do you?
Yeah.
You do?
Yes, we do. Yeah.
Well, I've looked at the Philpott family. Apparently they own half of Polk County at one time. But they apparently own Reuben Davis too. But said, my master allowed me to raise crop. And interestingly, his witness, one of his witnesses was Benjamin Guyton, who I just talked about. Now, Wiley, Crawford, Barber. That ought to strike some of you know who he was, don't you? Apparently, he was extremely wealthy at one point in time. He filed a claim for $2,218. And he's got a list of what they took. And apparently he had a large plantation here, and also had a plantation in Mississippi, 2 plantations in Mississippi, but at least in Polk County. He's got a list. They came in, they took everything the man had. Took everything he had. And he wrote, the officers said it was theirs and they must have it. That's what he wrote in his petition. And then he writes that he begged them to leave something for his family. He had a large family, and he begged them to leave something, but they wouldn't leave anything. And the list goes on and on and on about, I mean, they took not only his farm animals and the fodder and wheat and oats and everything else. They went into the kitchen and took everything. I'm talking about everything. $2,218. His claim, and he went on and on about how he apparently was a member of, he either was a member or was present at the secession convention, which would have been in Milledgeville when they voted to succeed. And he went with an entourage. He apparently had some sort of a relationship, may have been the manager of Cooper's Iron Works over in Bartow County. Mark Cooper had a large industry. He was affiliated with that, And he took a bunch of the Cooper's Iron Works officials with him, and they pleaded and pleaded and pleaded with the delegates to the secession convention to not succeed, but they succeeded. But he, his biography, the document online does not tell me why they denied his claim, but I know why they did. They didn't. The finding is not included in these documents. But I found a pretty extensive obituary and biography of him online. Also a picture of his house, which was magnificent, said he was a judge. Okay, if he became a judge, if you were any kind of an official under the Confederate government, you were required to take an oath of allegiance. And that was one of the disqualifying things. If you ever took an oath of allegiance, even if it was under duress, you were disqualified. He was disqualified. John P. Greenwood filed a claim for $1,512, and it was denied, and the finding that the commissioners wrote said he made saddles for the rebel army, went to Polk County to file his claim, known as disloyal. And then there's a note that is written below the finding that attributes it to anonymous information. Said he made saddle for rebel army, went to Polk County to put in claim, known well here. He done all he could for the rebel cause. And it's got, beside that, 3 names, all from Cartersville. You know, so apparently he was from Cartersville. They knew him in Cartersville as being a rebel sympathizer, just like everybody else was. And so he came over here and put in his claim. Denied. Then we have John R. Heaton, who put in a claim for $967. They took horses, mule, flour, bacon, all taken in Polk County. The finding was that some testimony as to his loyalty to the Union cause was put into the record, but that he had a son in the Confederate Army, and he furnished his son clothes. And there was no evidence that he was molested by the Confederate scouts. So if you had a son, and your son came home on furlough or got injured, and you gave him a shirt or a pair of underwear, you were disqualified. You were no longer loyal. And in particular with John Heaton, there were several witnesses who talked at length about how he was well known in the community for having loyalties toward the Union and opposing secession from the get-go. But he had a son in the Army, gave him a shirt or something. William Hickman is the next one. He put in a claim for $584.50. They took his hogs, bacon, sheep, beef, corn syrup, and wheat. And the finding was that he was paid $85 for mule shoes furnished to the Confederacy in March of 1864. They had a receipt that somehow the commissioners came up with a receipt from a Union officer, a Confederate officer who gave him an IOU for $85. Didn't pay him, but he gave him an IOU. Well, he was disallowed. They also found, as to his testimony about what he did or didn't do to show his Union sympathies, found that the Confederate Army tried to arrest him as a conscript. You know, as the war went on, to begin with, it went up to a certain 35 or something. And then when things started looking worse and we were losing so many people, they increased it. They kept increasing it. They had 3 different levels of increase. Where by the end, they were, if you could walk, even if you had a daggone cane with you, they were going to take you and put you somewhere. But he was, they found that he was a member of Captain H. Whitman's Cavalry Company. This is an interesting note that the commissioners wrote, which the Confederates, and I quote, by way of derision, called the Buttermilk Cavalry. End quote. I don't think that was a compliment. And then Robertson Judkins is next. He had died by the time 1871 came around, and his his widow, Martha Judkins, filed his petition and wrote very articulately. I was kind of impressed with her handwriting and the way she expressed herself. And she, there was no reason given for the denial, but I suspect it might have been that she talked about how he was old and feeble and was not interested in political or governmental matters, and so he didn't say anything against the union or anything else. And then, of course, he was on his deathbed anyway, but they turned him down for $338.75. The next is Jonathan Long. He filed a claim for $2,050. It took 5 horses, 4,000 pounds of bacon. What are you doing with 4,000 pounds? 25 hogs, 5 sheep, 100 gallons of sorghum, and 7 head of cattle. And the finding on Mr. Long was he sold the Confederate States $247 worth of fodder, referred to a receipt from a Captain J.T. Arnold of the Confederate Army. Next one, Thomas J. Thompson, disallowed in the amount of $882.50. He told a good bit, he wrote a good bit about how he was mistreated by the Confederate scouts. In one instance, he talked about 200 Confederate scouts came up to his house and came and basically took anything they wanted, horses, mules, whatever. Went in the kitchen and got what they wanted. And they didn't pay him anything. But here's what the finding was as to Mr. Thompson. Mr. Thompson lived on his farm of 200 acres in Polk County, Georgia. He was Justice of the Peace all through the war, was re-elected during the war, and took the oath of allegiance to the Confederacy. He also joined the Home Guards and then took the oath again and served 6 months. While in the Home Guard, he guarded Union prisoners. We reject the claim. Now, see, what they would do if the older people, when they start increasing the conscription, if you join the Georgia militia, which was Governor Joe Brown's army, that did not answer to Jefferson Davis in Richmond and could not be conscripted from the Georgia militia into the Confederate Army. And Joe Brown fought with the Confederate government all the way through that. So a lot of these people would join either the Home Guard. Y'all have seen Cold Mountain? You seen that? You see what the Home Guard was in that? I think that was an accurate portrayal. Those of you that haven't seen it, if you're interested in this subject, see Cold Mountain, about what the Southerners were going through, not just at the hands of the War of Northern Aggression, but at the hands of their own people. Pretty bad. William Wheeler, this is my favorite one. And we're winding down. But William Wheeler filed a claim for $360 for 2 horses and a mule. And he writes at length about his experiences of being hunted down by scouts. Do y'all know what the scouts were sometimes called bushwhackers? Well, it was a group. Well, it's kind of like if you saw Cold Mountain, those people weren't really Home Guard. They were out to steal and kill. I mean, they didn't really care which side you were on. They were a group of people who were looking out for themselves and had no allegiance to anybody. Although around here, they mostly professed to be in sympathy with the Confederacy. There also were groups that were what I call bushwhackers, that were in sympathy with the Union cause. In particular, in Bartow County, sometimes they fought each other. So William Wheeler initially joined the Georgia militia. He talks about going, he was sent to Resaca. We're talking, what, April 1864, he was sent to Resaca to go there and fight for the Confederacy, but he couldn't get through. Said he couldn't get through. So he went to Chattanooga and cut wood for the Union Army. Well, that sounds like a deserter to me. I mean, you know, I mean, if you can't get through to Thacker, I mean, surely you can find a Confederate Union somewhere. But then he comes back to Polk County, and these bushwhackers, these scouts, get after him. And real interestingly, he writes that his brother James was killed by bushwhacker John Gatewood. Have y'all ever heard of bushwhacker John Gatewood? I want to refer you to a book. First, Google John P. Gatewood. He's a murdering thief that called himself a Confederate scout. He had 100 to 200 men that rode with him. And he would ride up to a house, and if there was an invalid Confederate soldier that came home on furlough, well, he didn't take his word for it. He'd just shoot and kill him, and usually hang him up in the front yard. If he knew there was a Union sympathizer, and not just in Polk County, but he did get over in Polk County, but it's all over northwest Georgia. And the Union Army was chasing him, and they couldn't catch him, and he killed hundreds of people. I read in this book, John P. Gatewood, Confederate Bushwhacker, was written by Larry D. Stevens, who is assistant librarian at Georgia Highlands in Rome. And it's real well done, very well researched. He tells about how John Gatewood in Catoosa County, up above Lafayette, is that Walker County? Yeah, that's Walker County. Yeah, it's between Lafayette and a place called Rock Springs up there. He went around and rounded up 13 men that he accused of being Union sympathizers, shot them in the head, and hung them on trees lining on the road with a note on each one of them that whoever cuts this man down will get the same thing. So Gatewood was here, killed William Wheeler's brother. But William Wheeler got away from the scouts. He got away from them, and he went to Kingston, Georgia. He rode his horse there. And he got there, and the Yankees took his horse. And so he filed a claim for it, but they denied it because the finding was the above name appears on the muster roll of Captain H.F. Wimberley's Company Y Floyd Legions as a private soldier. So that's from, I guess, from whom he was deserting when he went to Chattanooga. And then the last one is Green M. Horton, I guess is how you pronounce that, W-H-O-R-T-O-N. He filed a claim for $421 for mule, pork, beef, cloth, syrup, corn, oats, fodder, and dried fruit. He's one of them where they came in, they took everything, left him with nothing to feed his family. He had avoided conscription. He was born in Polk County, but he moved to Cherokee County, Alabama. He lived in Cherokee County, Alabama in 1864, but he also had property in Polk County. Well, he wrote in his petition that he avoided conscription in Cherokee, Alabama. Conscription as in he was hiding out in the woods to keep the home guard or whoever it was the Confederates were sending around to get people who were supposed to be conscripted. But the finding on Mr. Wharton was that he sought the office of Justice of the Peace in Cherokee County, Alabama, where he resided in 1864, and was elected to that office and took the oath to support the Constitution of the Confederate States. When he sought that office and took that oath, his actions being entirely voluntary, he did not, and in quotations, adhere. You remember one of those questions I read, it used the word adhere to the Constitution of the United States. He did not adhere to the cause of the government of the United States. The claim is disallowed. You know, I recommend to you that those of you that may be interested in this, just go. I know you can access these on Ancestry.com, but I think you can access them. They're in the National Archives. And I think you can access them in other ways. That's just my path to it was Ancestry.com. And when you look at it, you'll see 3 different volumes. There'll be an index that has every name by state. It'll be the state, and it gives every name. And out beside, in the middle column, it'll tell you what county they were from. You have the state of Georgia, and then what county they're from, and then Sometimes they say what year the petition was filed, sometimes they don't. And then in the right-hand column, they tell you whether it's allowed or disallowed. Some of them, they said barred instead of disallowed. I think barred meant you had some direct involvement that they could prove for action against the union forces. But once you look at that index, you cannot access anything from that index. What you're doing from that index is you're getting the county information, so you then can go to the two other volumes. One volume is for allowed claims, and the other volume is for disallowed or barred claims. And again, you got it by state, and then by name, and not in alphabetical order, but and it'll have counties randomly all through. And like what I did, I just went through, went to the allowed and disallowed, and everyone from Polk County that I saw, I can click on that name, and it brings me, the record. Now there are a lot of them, the record's not there. It's just nothing. Some of them, it was just a file folder with a person's name on it. I can't explain that. But if you want to read what happened in Polk County to the people who lived here and lived and breathed Union occupation under Sherman's forces, it's a good way to find it right there. Thank you. Reminds me of Aunt Pitty Pat and gone over and say, Yankees in Georgia?
Any questions?
I have a question. How did they pay them? Because what currency? And of course they couldn't write a check. How did they pay them? Did they go around with coins?
I think in most instances they gave them an IOU type thing, but it seems to indicate from what I read that some of them were actually paid, but I don't know how they did that. Probably Confederate money, and then they got it and it wasn't worth anything anyway. And they got disallowed too.
But it seemed like they got people who were local that knew all this information. I'm impressed or amazed at how thorough they were and seemed to know what they were talking about all the people who submitted requests.
Well, and what's interesting is not just reading each of these claimants answering these 51 questions, but the witnesses that they had. In some instances, they had 3 or 4 witnesses that were neighbors that would go through the series of questions that they had to answer and give specific details. And I was most impressed with those that gave the narrative about what happened when they were out in the field and 200 Yankees drove up and started loading up their mules and horses and going into the kitchen and getting everything they had in it. I mean, what they felt and what they wrote is pretty incredible. It's great source material for what really happened. And if you think I have sympathies toward the Confederacy, you would be right. But I will tell you one last thing, and I'm done. My wife and I have been married, 34 years now. We've been married 5 or 6 years, and this internet thing starts up. I mean, my God, you can go on the computer, and my 12-year-old daughter showed me how to turn one on, and how to maneuver around it and everything, and I did. And I found a site that had the ability to search a name of a soldier who fought in the Civil War. And you go on it, and the first thing you click on is either Union or Confederate. And then you click on the state. But if you click Union, you're going to get, there were Union soldiers from Georgia. That's another day. I've got to talk on that too. But so I click on Confederate because, my mother-in-law and their mother told the whole family that their great-great-grandfather fought in the Atlanta campaign. And so I'm thinking, okay, I know what county he was from, and he was from Dawson County, and so, I click on Georgia and I type in his name, nothing. Nothing, he's not there. And so I tried it again, nothing. And so just as a lark, I clicked on Union. He walked to Chattanooga, I now know, from Dawsonville, Georgia in 1863. with his 2 brothers and a couple of nephews, and they joined the Union Army. And he did fight in the Atlanta campaign. I went in the kitchen, I said, okay, that does it. That does it. I want an annulment. Yankees and Georgia, how they do?
Oh, Mr. Archer, we thank you so very much. And we may be back in touch.
Absolutely.
Do you know anything about the state of Dade?
The state of Dade?
I figured you would.
I do.
We might want a program on that sometime too. For those of you who don't know, Dade County, Georgia did not secede.
Union County, that's how it got its name, I understand. Union County, they never seceded.
Really?
Very
They
interesting.
didn't have to, they
did. Mr. Gray,
Yes.
do we have any acquisitions?
Well, one thing I'd like to tell you, I didn't bring it down tonight. Billy Garrett brought in a Treat Mountain apple label that went on the apple crates that shipped out of Treat Mountain, Georgia. And I got it framed, ready to put in. He said he found it in a magazine, folded up. And he come down and we had a wonderful talk. That guy's got a wealth of knowledge. I'm looking forward to meeting with him again. He's got Lena Burbank's dad's pistol that he had, and Mr. Burbank had the drugstore, Dr. Burbank, and he plans on donating it at some point in time. But that Treat Mountain apple label was pretty impressive to me. So I've not heard or seen anybody have anything like that. So I think that's it.
Does anyone else have any announcements?
How about, tell them about your, whatever you're making.
Back over here, I started making rag rugs, and the ones that I got there are made out of grocery bags. And I amazed Miller Greer that he put me on Facebook and all kinds of stuff, and made me bring that down to show y'all. But the one on the floor is finished, and then I'm trying to finish that one up. The one that's in the frame right now, and I made the frame myself for less than $10, is that's my 5th one that I've made. So I'm a professional now. So.
The blue one in there, some Patsy cases. It was on sale, and my wife bought it, and we donated that to Greg.
Yeah. Charlotte thought that I would get a whole rug out of that blue bag.
Are there any other announcements? I'd like to thank Debbie Frazier and Doris Davis for refreshments tonight, and I'm going to ask Glenn Frazier, if he will, to dismiss us in prayer, and we'll adjourn to refreshment.